To start off with, why don't we start right at the end with Ken?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ken Krasnow. I'm the Vice President of Omnichannel Marketing at Henkel, not the knife company, but the global consumer packaged goods company. We sell products that you love and use every day in laundry, home care, and adhesives. And my Omnichannel team consists of traditional media, digital marketing, shopper marketing, merchandising, national promotions, the consumer call center, and packaging design, all to create a seamless experience for consumers from media to shelf. I'm happy to be here with you today.
Welcome, Ken.
My name is Ken Natori. Good morning. I'm the president of a company called Natori. We're a high-end women's fashion brand. We're most known in the marketplace for high-end women's sleepwear and bras and underwear, and we've been evolving over the last decade to become more of a lifestyle brand. Moving into collections such as clothing, bedding, towels, legwear, fragrance, rugs, and a number of other categories as well. So I joined the business 12 years ago. When I did so, we were exclusively wholesale, selling to high-end department stores such as Saks and Neiman Marcus. We have evolved that business model rather aggressively. While wholesale is still very important, our direct-to-consumer business, including Natori.com, is a very key part of our business now and, of course, of our strategy going forward. We have used artificial intelligence specific to that business to power our social media ad buying, and excited to cover that. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Soumya Donkada. I lead innovation and strategy for a portfolio of businesses close to $1 billion for Unilever North America. I do, as a part of my role, I do process and as well as product innovation, and data-driven marketing is core to what I do. I have been with Unilever for 10 years across multiple offices. I have been with them across Mumbai, London, Paris, and now New York. Yeah, it has been a bit of journey with them. So excited to be here.
Thank you, panel. Alex Kelleher, Managing Director with Deloitte Digital. We obviously do a lot in this space. Super excited particularly to talk to retail. Huge sector for us, and it's a sector that we probably see as the most innovative, using machine learning and AI approaches. And I don't really know why that is, apart from I think you guys have lots of data. You're obviously risk takers, and there's a fair amount of money flowing through your businesses, particularly in marketing, right? And I think we're seeing a test and learn philosophy there particularly. So super excited to be here. What I'd like to do towards the end is have you guys kind of chip in and ask questions. I know it's the spot before the coffee break, so hopefully you can make it through to there and think of the questions you want to ask, and we'll get there in a while. In terms of how we see organizations adopting AI, it's different every time, I think is fair to say. And it can be a big change. It can happen very naturally, and would love to hear from you guys how that happened in your organizations. You represent very diverse organizations. Soumya, maybe tell us a little bit about Unilever, how this is happening.
I think it was not a natural change to begin with. We were forced to change. When I talk about like disruption in CPG, you might be thinking, oh, really? But yeah, I would like to talk about a context on why we are talking disruption in CPG. I think there are like macro forces which are affecting CPG in many ways. The first one is emergence of polycultural America. I think we are getting into a phase where you are seeing a blend of races, incomes, cultures of America. To give you an example, multicultural consumers are 40% of America. Gen Z would be the biggest cohort in 2020. 46% of Americans identify themselves as lower class. So this is one part of it. I think the second part of it is polarization. I think polarization of views driven by media. I think I needn't talk about it. This is another aspect. The third one is environment is under stress. So there is more and more, like bigger organizations are being asked to be more transparent, more sustainable as we go forth. And the final thing is probably the emergence of new competition. When I say emergence of new competition, I don't think our competitors are no longer your L'Oreal, P&G, or J&Js of the world. It's actually those ankle biters, as I call them. Like that's the kind of like competition which we are talking about. To give you a perspective, there are at any given point of time, our key competitors on a Walmart shelf is like 30 to 50 brands. Can you give a pop quiz? Can you take a guess on how many would they be on an Amazon shelf? Wild guess.
1,000.
Actually, pretty close. It's 850. So those are the kind of like competitors which we are talking about. These are the brands who actually do speak to millennials and Gen Z one-to-one. Okay, so these are the brands who speak to them one-to-one, is a brand who actually embody the idea of is a brand for me, brand which speaks to me. So as a result, I think the change which we are seeing in the market landscape is we cannot do a one-size-fits-all strategy. We need to have a personalized approach to brands, not just established brands, but also we need to launch new brands to take on fragmentation. So AI and data plays a big role in that.
That's a great point. Ken Natori, are you an ankle biter?
Never called myself that, but I'm happy to share our journey and sort of how we ended up here. So when a lot of people think about companies that have implemented AI successfully, you probably think of huge, really sophisticated organizations with big R&D budgets, sophisticated systems, et cetera. Not even close to us. So we are we'd like to think our brand has some cachet out in the marketplace, but we remain a privately held family business. And I think what led us to AI is, as I mentioned in the introduction, we went from being an exclusively wholesale company to a company through our .com that's now competing not just with other brands that a lot of which are much bigger than us, but also with a lot of retailers as well. So we are kind of a small fish. I guess we are an ankle biter. So sure, realization. So we have our company has had to, with basically the same amount of staff over the last years, become good at doing a couple things to really, we have to show and compete on a wide scale against much bigger retailers in a much broader scale. And basically, we need to do a lot more things than we used to do. So how did we end up on this AI journey? We launched Natori.com about 11 years ago. We implemented at first, we were scared about upsetting some of the wholesalers that we sold to. So we launched very quietly when everything was fine, and we stayed true to price. We started a paid search campaign, eventually ended up bringing on an agency to do that. And then about 2.5 years ago, we were looking both at doing something more sophisticated with our social media ad buying, and then also implementing artificial intelligence. I came across through a business network that I'm a part of, a company called Albert. And I knew I had accountability with Albert because I was part of the organization with the head of the company. So we decided to use Albert to power all of our social media ad buying. And it has really been, a tremendous success, not only from an ROI standpoint, but also because we've been able to really just get much bigger in terms of how we compete without adding a lot of stress or a lot of additional responsibility or work to our internal organization.
Ken, Ken from Henkel, it's good job we don't have 3 Kens on the panel. Review last. Does that resonate with you, or did you have a different sort of onboarding with AI?
It all resonates. Both stories resonate. We had a bit of a different approach. Henkel is 140 years old this year. And one of the things that Henkel realizes is that they need to accelerate digitalization. And that's really, really difficult to do within a legacy company like that. So what they actually did was went out and hired a chief digital officer about 2 years ago by the name of Ramin Kress. And he created something called Henkel X. And he's been given the authority really to bring outside thinking into the organization in the form of startups. And we do a lot of work with startup companies, and he has a whole process around that. And so I got introduced to artificial intelligence, and the company did as well through this Henkel X platform, right, that was created to do this type of thing. And we spent, about a year not only vetting partners, we arrived on a company called R4 that came to us through this Henkel X organization. I would say probably the first couple of months was vetting. The rest of it was kind of getting your way through a legacy company, right? And getting through, like Ryan said, getting through some of the no's, right? Getting through that won't work here, or some of the fear, you know? And it took the better part of, 7 or 8 months to arrive at a use case. Now, one of the neat things about Henkel is, although we're a $20 billion company, we're very much a challenger brand. We compete against our dear friend over here from Unilever, who we respect very much. We can't get into the same ring, right? Because we don't have the dollars to punch it out with Unilever. So what we need to do is we've got to find ways to be more precise. And one of the use cases that we came up with was to find high potential consumers that should be buying more of our brands, but for one reason or another aren't. Maybe low awareness, maybe they bought them and they liked them, but there was deals on other brands and they fell into a rut buying some other brand. And so we leveraged AI initially to find these high potential consumers that live near a particular retailer that agreed to join us in this use case. And we dug a marketing moat around these high potential users and surrounded them with communication to draw them into store. So we thought this was a terrific use case to leverage artificial intelligence, to move away from spray and pray, hope it works, hope people come to the store and buy our products, to leveraging broad reach in TV, but also precision marketing. And so far, we've been very, very happy with that. And there are other use cases that we'll talk about, I'm sure, today as well.
So was that an internal project, or you said you worked with a partner on?
We did. So our partner is R4, and I think, yep, there's Phil in the back. And these are the founders of Priceline.com. So that all of a sudden instilled a ton of confidence in me and others who are not. I'm not a data scientist. We do have data scientists at Henkel, and we brought them in to vet R4. And so that's our primary partner. But I would say our retail partners, I don't know if Ryan is still in the room, but over a third of our business is at Walmart. So retail is extremely important to us. And we do have a large retail partner that was willing to give us the data we needed, right? Data is the raw material, and we needed store level sales data. And most retailers are not willing to let that go. Many retailers are fearful, right, of breaches and all those types of things. One large retailer said, we're okay with that. We're so excited about this. We can't do all the learning ourselves. We need these little pilots with suppliers. And so I would say the retailer was, without the retailer leaning in, we would be nowhere right
so
now.
Soumya, is that presumably similar for Unilever?
Oh, yes. I don't think it's any different. I would like to understand how you got data from Walmart. We could take it offline.
We didn't get it from Walmart. I said, Ryan's here, and I would like to talk to Ryan about getting his store level data.
Like get us home?
It was another
We don't like
customer.
that data, yeah.
Another customer.
Yeah, I think it's interesting we talk about use cases, and yes, we have a lot of media dollars, but at the same time, you want them to work it effectively. I think there are like 3 or 4 areas which Unilever uses AI, is on an AI journey on. One is like trends. I work in beauty and personal care. Trends is a core part of my job. And trends, when I talk about like beauty and fashion trends, what these brands, the ankle biters on Amazon do very well is to see the trend and bring it to the market in 3 months. Currently through AI, we have a model on how trends travel from Asia to Europe to US, okay? How it travels from face care to hair care to every other care. We kind of have a model on like when something gets picked up as an emerging trend in Japan, how soon will it actually hit in US? So we kind of like, obviously this was not possible in an AI, it's in a world which is not AI driven. So we have this kind of monitoring happening at a global level where we get information on what's happening globally and how it impacts us. And obviously, as Ken has spoken about, it's not about like just noticing trends. Are we agile enough to actually bring this to market? Because we are a massive organization. When you want a massive organization to switch, it is actually a humongous task. I'm being trained as a Scrum Master. Okay, so this is for real. It's not about like, yes, we are bringing external experts, but we also want the core of the organization to come to a level where everyone is in the agile way of working. So that's one part. The second part, which Ken has spoken about, is about precision marketing. That's how we build relevance for established brands. Like we have brands like Dove, we have brands like Suave. It's about, I have spoken about polycultural America, and I have spoken to you for a reason. The reason I have said, there are audience segments, and you can speak to them specifically. You can speak to them now in a personalized way. Earlier, it was like TV, which is a broadcast medium. There was a lot of wastage of dollars. Now it's about you can speak. It has other challenges, of course, but we can speak to them now. I think the third one is performance marketing. You put like 200 creators out there, and you do dynamic creative optimization. Obviously, it is AI powered, but there is also human interference in it. I think the final one is actually customer service. We recently launched an app called Alexander, where Alexander it operates a neural network. It actually monitors social conversations. I quite like the name Alexander. And,
it's a good name.
It's a good name. It's for Schmidt's Naturals. And it's actually a cool app, which it's a virtuous data. Like it gets more data and also like creates more personalized content for the consumer. So these are various ways we are looking.
Is that an internal app, or we can all?
You
We should all.
You can say hi to him.
Oh, there we go. I'll say hi to myself. Lots of things you mentioned there. Something particularly I wanted to pick up on, Ken Natori, was the insights piece, right? AI is a great enabler for not just for personalization, for sort of better targeting people, but also just to get better insights about what's really happening with the huge volumes of data that all of you are dealing with. And while you're an ankle biter, you're quite a big ankle biter, so I'd love to hear about sort of how you're using analytics and trend sort of information in your business.
Right. So I'd say, in terms of what we have done, so how have our learnings from using artificial intelligence on our paid social affected the organization? I'd say the first thing it's done is, we obviously go over the results with our account manager at Albert every month. And I think a couple of the things that we've done, certainly within paid social, we've seen some trends that have been sort of self-corrected within the module itself. So, we noticed in March, for example, we really started getting just a huge percentage of our sales between the hours of 6 and 9 p.m. And it just sort of started to build, and then we saw that happen, and then it wasn't so much that we had to do anything. Albert just sort of figured out what was going on, and then we saw that the percentage of ads that we were serving at that time just continued to increase, which really helped our business. So there's sort of those things that happen kind of behind the scenes. In terms of what we've done more broadly, when we launched with Albert in June of 2017, one of the bigger things we saw was that the more content that we had, whether it was video types, whether it was mood images, et cetera, like basically everything was doing much better as we had more diversity in terms of our images, and that actually really helped change our creative budget and also the types of ads that the types of images and types of content that we created. So that was kind of one of the bigger changes in terms of how it's affected our organization. As I've mentioned, we are still at this point majority wholesale organization, and our sort of e-commerce digital marketing team, it continues to grow, but still is, it's a minority in the organization. We have not taken as much of the leap into using data from artificial intelligence to really power our design and our merchandising. And that is going to be, I'm not quite sure when that's going to happen, to be honest. We kind of have, if you can envision it, an older school organization, and we've sort of nurtured and fostered and grown this, quickly growing sort of new school organization within an old school organization. And obviously there's lots of delicate hand-holding you have to do. When I first mentioned that we were we were implementing artificial intelligence. I literally half the room. We've got so many employees that have been with us for 20 plus years. I don't think anybody even heard like the sentence come out of my mouth, and they probably still don't even know what we're doing with it. So yeah, we haven't quite made the leap where artificial intelligence is powering everything we do, but sort of trying to think, especially hearing some of the comments today, like what is that next leap and how do we do that?
Did you want to say something, Ken? No. So we've all talked about data, touched upon data. In what we're saying, it's clearly a requirement to do everything that all of us want to do and do on a daily basis. But you start to enter an area where there are issues around people's privacy, about the perception of use of data, around the quality of data. If you do internet marketing, the data can be of very variable quality, let's put it that way. The cost of storage, all of these sort of issues around data. We'd love to hear, Ken, maybe you can kick us off, how Henkel, firstly, from what data do I need to get going? Because if you guys follow the consumer data platform space, it's sort of a new acronym for a way of storing customer data, but companies like Adobe and Salesforce are rushing into this space because the idea of structuring data better to do machine learning well is top of most people's lists. So we'd love to hear your thoughts.
No, that's a great question. It's interesting, and I'm going to put that in the context of some of the massive headwinds that we're facing at Henkel, and I think large CPG companies in particular, are facing. Number one, a recent survey came out on Havas conducted it. 75% of all consumers wouldn't care if brands disappeared tomorrow, right? Retailers are, like Walmart's and Target's and others, and Kroger, are building very powerful private label brands. In fact, 1/3 of all Kroger sales are private label brands. So as a legacy CPG company, we have to think of new ways of creating value for our retail partners and for consumers. And data is really the asset, the raw material that's going to enable that. The marketing tech stack is central, right? Because what we're looking for is a single view of the consumer, right? Across their terrestrial and their digital devices, so that we can glean as much insight about them as possible and segment them into high-value audiences where we know things like Net Promoter Score and lifetime value, and we can make really, really smart decisions about how to serve their needs best. And if we can drive these consumers with deeper knowledge to our key retail partners, that's one way of saying, hey, our brands really should matter to you, Mr. and Mrs. Retailer, because we have this relationship with your shoppers who are very important to you and very important to us. And I think that word relationship is really critical, because I think we're in a relationship economy. I mean, we hear that we're an experience economy, and I think that's true. We've moved from pulling stuff out of the ground and kind of bartering and trading it, to now creating experiences. But experiences really are all about creating relationships. And to do that here with my panel is very simple. I can, after have coffee, and I can strike up a conversation. How do you do that with people that you haven't even met? And it's really through the data and bringing that data into the tech stack. The most important data, long way of answering your question, for us is registration data. It's PII, personal information. It's getting somebody to say, you know what? Your proposition, your value proposition, beyond the features and benefits, because that won't in most cases get there, but your added value proposition is so worth it to me that I'm going to give you something very valuable of mine as a consumer, and that's my name and my email address, and I'm going to fill out a preference form, tell you a little bit about myself. That's enormous to get that amount of information. What you have to do is you've got to create, epic content. And I think Unilever is doing a fantastic job. Are you responsible for the James Corden stuff?
No.
Oh, unbelievable. Unbelievable.
But
you know what I'm talking
great.
about.
Yeah,
It's unbelievable. I mean, look, it's incredible. You should go look at it. I can't remember the name of the series, but it's James Corden, who everybody loves and thinks is funny, and with an influencer, and they have this banter back and forth, and they're clearly selling something.
Yeah.
But boy, I mean, if I didn't work for a competitor, I'd probably give you my name and address just to get alerts as to when the next, segment is coming. And then so then you bring all of this data in, all this registration data, this very valuable stuff, and you bring that into your data lake or your CDP or your DMP or wherever it is, and you've got to treat it very preciously, and you've got to safeguard it. Not only do you have to make sure it's clean and it's accurate, but you've got to have the right protections in place, and you've got to be up on all the laws, GDPR, because we operate in Europe, and the California Consumer Protection Law, and you've got to be very, very conscious of that, because while people are willing to give you their data for the right value exchange, the moment you step across a line, they can opt out of everything, right, immediately.
And it feels like with GDPR and the Californian law that the online, certainly anonymous data piece is at risk, right? I think, and we've all had experience where an ad has followed us around for weeks. Bad brand experiences with ads that may not have great creative, or they're targeted badly, or they're just missing a point with the user consumer. Ken, you're running a .com, which is sort of right up front there, trying to attract traffic, trying to attract conversions. How are you thinking about the data on all of us and how you can use it?
Yeah. So I think I'll say this. So I think there's a perception out there that if you are going to take the leap and use artificial intelligence for any of your paid campaigns, that your data has to be really clean and organized. And I will tell you, when we launched this effort a couple of years ago, our data was not. And that was one of the discussions we had with our partners going into it. How clean and organized does our data need to be? And they said, you know what? Yeah, if your data is organized, great. But if it's not, that's fine. Really, because the learning that Albert will do in the first couple of months, first 2 to 5 months of the program, that's really going to be more important than anything you have going in. So we launched once again, like I said, in June of 2017. Our partners previewed to us that the return on investment will be okay, but probably not like mind-boggling for the first couple of months, but just give everything time, and that you'll see as we go out 5, 6, 7, 8 months, everything will continue to improve, and it really did. So I think for those of you out there that are sort of toying or thinking about the idea of incorporating artificial intelligence into any of your paid campaigns, certainly having your data completely clean and organized isn't necessarily a prerequisite as you enter.
Soumya, none of us as consumers particularly want to be tracked and followed and our data stored. Unilever presumably has large amounts of that data. Yeah. How do you guys think about it?
I think I would like to talk about, for us, the biggest challenge is the amounts of data, the verifiability of the data, and then how do we use it? We use various sources of data. We use 1P, 2P, and as well as 3P. So obviously the data which we have of consumers is probably the most robust, which we have as a part of the cloud. The other data sources we buy. Yeah, we buy data from other sources. There is also what kind of data you're buying. There are also data signals which you buy. So
do you think consumers know how much data you have, or do you think they care?
Yes and no. I think there is more awareness, for sure. For one, as a consumer, I'm okay sharing data.
Yeah.
But again, obviously, it's a kind of a gray area. But when it comes to all the rules and regulations, we are always on the right side.
Where does Henkel say on that value exchange? I'll give you my data if I get something back.
Well, I would say, first of all, I would just say as consumers, I think we all want to share our data. It's the degree to how much you want to share it. And you may say, well, that's not true. I would never want to share my data. Well, the next time you go to a website that you've been to many, many times, and it doesn't auto-populate all the information that you've already entered before, you'll be like, yeah, of course, I want to share some data. It's just kind of the amount of data that you want to share. How do you create a value exchange that's worth getting more and more data from consumers to build a deeper and deeper relationship that feels more and more personal and feels trusted, and trust, takes a long, long time to build, and as we all know, it can evaporate in a second. So how can you be super, super careful about that? And I don't think I answered your question.
You said interesting things, which is
Okay,
the point.
There's half of it.
and what do you think are sort of building on that point more about sort of looking at this, looking at AI and what we're doing with data from a consumer's point of view? You know, you can think of this as consumers or for your businesses. You know, who's doing it well? When do consumers know that you've got it right? And you know, is it maybe that they're not realizing, but it's a great experience? To your point about consumer experience, Ken, you probably do sort of work on your website in terms of sort of figuring out.
Yeah, sure. So I think I can share
if you
actually
don't.
one story that's sort of tangentially related that might be interesting for brands out there that are, you know, either on this venture already or thinking about going on it. So, you know, it hasn't been all smooth. The results from, you know, our using artificial intelligence on our paid social have overall been great. But obviously, taking that leap, there are some things that you know, one of the fears going in is how much control would we lose? And there are instances where we did for a little bit, but then we course corrected. So it's maybe an interesting story as you guys think about this journey. So, you know, when we sort of set up the parameters for our paid social campaigns, obviously, you know, one of the biggest metrics we looked at was conversions. And as many of you know in the business, you know, consumers love hearing about sales. They love hearing about promotions. So, you know, a couple months into into our launch, the results started getting really good. They were great. But then we started getting some comments, both internally and from customers, saying, you know, God, it kind of looks like on Facebook that you guys are like a discount sales site. And that kind of makes sense, right? Because you know, Albert was noticing that customers were clicking on every ad that we had that promoted a sale or featured a promotion. So it started feeding those ads a lot more. And the next thing we knew, you know, it sort of got a little bit out of control where it felt like Natori.com and even our brand was too promotional, and that's kind of all that we were doing. Fortunately, though, you know, we did observe this, and then we sort of had our partners reset and readjust the algorithm, setting like a maximum percentage in terms of the number of sale-related or promotion-related creatives that it was allowed to serve. We saw a little bit of a blip in terms of our ROAS in the following weeks, but then from there it actually continued to increase. So I think yes, there are things that you do have to look out for. You know, if you set parameters the wrong way, you might not necessarily always be able to predict the outcomes and what that could lead to. But as long as you and your partners are sort of looking at the big picture overall, these things are able to to be adjusted, and you know, we got back on a better track in terms of how our brand was portrayed.
I think I would like to talk a bit about how data can be used for actually to build brand purpose and social impact. I think we always have this connotation about data where we see it as it's not always the way we see it, but it can be used to drive brand purpose. As you know, Unilever is a big champion of building brands with purpose, and we are truly committed to actually creating social impact. In my previous life, I had the opportunity to work on Dove campaign for Real Beauty. As you know, the Dove's insight is always built on beauty should be a source of confidence, not anxiety. So that's basically what it is. And we are committed to actually building self-esteem and as well as body confidence in women. The way beauty manifests across different cultures is different. So what we figured out was like, what is the beauty ideal across cultures? So we did a lot of social listening to figure out how beauty manifests. Say, for example, in India, I'll talk about India, where we figured out that women are particularly seen to be tall, thin, fair, with long black hair. That is the beauty ideal because that is something which is promoted on social media. So that came true. We also wanted to figure out where is the source of anxiety coming from. Actually, what we figured out that the source of anxiety or negativity is actually coming from matrimonial ads. So matrimonial ads on internet. Okay, so when I say matrimonial ads, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Indian culture. A lot of Indian marriages are arranged marriages where there are grooms who go and say that I want a bride to be fair, tall, thin, with long black hair. So what we did is we actually placed ads next to the ads saying that women of any shapes, sizes, and colors are wanted. It created a lot of controversy. It also created a situation, a lot of actually online ads did not want to air us. But actually that was one of the ways where we created relevance. Obviously there was a big campaign around it, and we actually created a grassroots movement where a lot of women came and spoke about on how actually creating awareness and starting conversation is one thing. So this is an interesting use case on how data can be used to create awareness and brand purpose. This also led us to believe, led us to actually create Dove Self-Esteem Fund and to create Next Women, the next generation with beauty and self-confidence. But the inception was actually building on the insight of what the beauty ideal was, and then actually going after it in a contextual way. You cannot do this without data, because we all had initial hypothesis on where the pressure would come from. My hypothesis was actually Bollywood. No, it was actually the matrimonial ads. Yeah.
I would jump on that and say we're leveraging data too to create more meaning for our brands. And what we did, we've used artificial intelligence to scrape the net for everything that our target consumers have been kind of talking about and everything they've been reading over a very long period of time. And we brought all of that data in and sifted through it to arrive at basically a model which could plot out the spaces that our competitors are really heavy in and where there might be white space for us. And then we looked to really reach for a moonshot, to do something that was less safe. And we found a topic in the data that we decided to go after. And we thought it was really apropos for the times. It was all around this notion of supporting mom. And the angle that we took based on the conversations is that what we needed to do was really kind of the conversations that she was having online that we had scraped, is that we had to really bring it down to micro moments, to the little moments in life. And this is where the human kind of, interceded, right? So the data told us that, but then as a little cross-functional team working on this campaign, we had to think about, well, how could we bring moments to life in a way that's really unique and interesting? And one of the people around the room said, well, gee, I read this book called The Power of Moments, and I'll give them a shout out because I love these authors, Dan and Chip Heath. The Power of Moments is absolutely fantastic. It's good for your personal life. It's good for your business life. And it talks about kind of how our entire lives are all made up of teeny weeny moments. And how we have so much control to influence these moments if we just step back. So as mom is in her very busy day and she's feeling stressed, which is what the data was telling us, our thinking was, could we create epic marketing content that was so compelling because it showed her little ways to slow down, right? Think about what's going on and how she might be able to change a moment that might be headed south to one that's more positive in her life. And so this was a blend of machine and people coming together to arrive at this platform that that we feel great about. We think our consumers. This is something that is launching now. We think our consumers are going to love it. And interestingly, it's galvanized our employees, right, around meaning. So brand meaning isn't just for the consumer; it's also for our employees. And I think we're getting more, right, out of people because we are standing for something really, really meaningful.
So it's fascinating. You've both talked about really the value of which is pleasing to me as a human being, the value of human beings with in working with AI and in finding its place as a tool to enable you to do those things in terms of creative, in terms of strategy. Ken, Natori, how within Natori are you? And you've also talked about sort of bringing the organization with you, right? And helping to explain to people we're not replacing your jobs, we're asking you actually probably to do smarter things. Is that working at Natori?
It is. I mean, our journey of AI integration is sort of an easy one, right? So I think when people think about bringing AI into their organization, the initial fear is how will the people who do this function feel about that and what's going to happen, and that's an understandable concern, and I'm sure a big roadblock on both sides. So when we launched AI, A, we did it with an outside party, and then B, we also did it on sort of a new project, right? We had done paid social, but we'd sort of done it internally in a pretty small scale. So really this was, when we brought it in, it was sort of taking on this whole new venture that we hadn't really done before. So yes, our path of integrating, I wouldn't even call it really integrating, but our path of introducing it to the organization has been very, almost 100% positive, but we certainly didn't have those fears where somebody was already doing that and had possibly their job or what they were doing, brought into question. So, and I think that's one, but I do think that's an important point, is that, when smaller or medium-sized organizations, they sometimes say, oh, God, I can't even think about artificial intelligence. Like, we don't have the budget, we don't have the A, B, C, D, and E. But I think we're an example of an organization where you can introduce it relatively painlessly. It's just a question of how you're bringing it in.
Actually, I have like a slightly different experience on how we integrated it, because we felt that actually we tried doing it to smaller initiatives and somehow it doesn't really scale up. Then we said that we need to do it on our biggest business and our biggest brands. It'll be a lot of pain, but that's how we go about with it. Because you create a case study for the biggest brand, and that's how you actually create learnings and create like impetus and urgency on how it needs to be done, and then scale it forth. Actually, a lot of AI initiatives are on our biggest brands and biggest businesses.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And all of you are, as you're thinking about sort of helping your organizations go down this journey, you're in a position to make decisions on vendors and approaches, on things you do and don't do. I think Media Post came out a couple of days ago and said that, this is a clickbait headline, but 85% of AI projects fail. Which, I don't know if that's true or not, and it certainly sounds like a fail harder approach, so maybe it's a good thing. How do you, as individuals in a position to make some really meaningful decisions for your businesses, but not having, I think, the mathematical sort of knowledge that some people in this room have about how deep learning works and how all these models work, how do you sort of look inside that black box and go, this is the right thing, this is not the right thing, these people, these partners are genuine, whatever it might be?
I think it's having really good partners, and Phil in the back from R4, I think, and members of his organization are very good storytellers, and I think that's a whole new job that's going to kind of crop up in this world of artificial intelligence and big data, because you need people to stand in the middle of the data scientists and the marketers to be able to reveal what is in that black box. So Phil makes it clear to me. I will ask him questions and he will break it down in a non-scientific way that instills confidence in me.
Yeah. Do you do bake-offs? Do you test vendors or strategies against, like how?
Well, the beauty of having this Henkel X organization, which is this, I was telling you, they do all the vetting for us. So what they're doing is they're bringing us the cream of the crop from a startup. So the business, which I'm part of, doesn't need to go through that.
Ken, you said great things about Albert. How do you know they're good?
Yeah, I think I'm not quite sure what the makeup of the conference here is, but for those of you that are on the vendor side, we would not have gone into artificial intelligence if I wasn't part of this business group. I'm part of a group called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And basically, somebody joined our chapter, the founder of Albert, and then we sat down together and decided we wanted to work together. So I know that he's accountable to me, just like I'm accountable to him. But had I not had that trust, I'm not sure we would have been able to go down this journey, because, like I said, brands like us, we are doing a million different things. There are so many things out there that we in the C-suite need to understand, and I'm not sure an outside vendor who was just on a sales call or trying to convince me that this was safe and the right thing to do, I'm not sure I could have ever gotten to that point had I not had this sort of external sort of force that was unifying the heads of both companies together. So I'm sure, for those of you on the vendor side, many of you think about, we need our algorithm, we need everything to be perfect, but really sort of like the marketing side and like the how do you create trust side, that to me is probably the biggest step between getting your company from a no to a yes.
Soumya, trust?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I don't think I ever responded to a cold sales call. I haven't. We have digital excellence teams and as well as center of excellence teams when it comes to data and as well as commerce. We also have obviously Mindshare, who does a big amount of planning and buying for us, and we get the cream of the crop. But at the same time, I think we are getting into a place where you cannot just be a marketer. You are doing marketing in a data-driven world. So it's not data-driven marketing, you're doing marketing in a data-driven world. So you need to understand, the owners and marketers, you need to understand the technical aspects of it as well. So if you don't ask the right questions to understand how things go, so it's not just about the output, but also about how the proprietary algorithms work and how much value they can add. So yes, we get the cream of the crop, but also we make sure that as business leaders, we ask the right questions to ensure that we get the most value out of for the business.
Awesome.
And we have workshops too, where to Soumya's point, we as marketers have to learn the language. We have to speak the language. I was just in Orvis on Fifth Avenue, and I took up fly fishing about 3 years ago, and I was talking to the salesman, and I just realized, oh wow, I'm speaking fly fishing. Anybody else that walked through the store wouldn't even understand it. So I think we're constantly learning new languages, right? All the time. We probably just don't even realize it. Well, this is just data, it's just another new language, and it's just about, just having the courage to step in and understanding it's an iterative process. I'm going to get a little bit as I go, and before you know it, you're speaking a language, and you step back and say, wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So, audience, I'm going to ask these guys one more question, but while I do that, I want you to think about questions that you have, particularly areas that we haven't covered, because we don't really have time to cover everything here, but things that you're interested in. So my final question for each of you is, we've seen in the keynotes earlier that AI is going through this, what it enables is going through this hockey stick change, right? And it's kind of been bubbling under for a while now, but pretty quickly, a lot of the things that we do on a daily basis are going to change quite rapidly. So I'd like you to think about your organization in 5 years' time, which I think is a big enough horizon to be pretty close, but also for a lot to happen. What your organization looks like and what we're talking about has changed in 5 years. And I'm going to start with you, Ken.
Wow. Well, I would love to see demand planning. I'm going to be really specific, okay? Because it's a huge opportunity for us. Missing your forecast is a giant, giant waste of financial resources, and there's an enormous amount of human resources that goes into figuring out, the forecast, which, many times out of 10 is wrong, right? Well, artificial intelligence can clear all of that up, freeing the salespeople to go do what they do best. And so I would love to see a world where Henkel says, you know what? We have these new products. We don't want to sell them in every Walmart store. We don't want to sell them in every Target store. We're using AI and demand forecasting to plan out the right business strategy. So for this particular product, we only want it in, let's say, 1,000 of the 3,400, 4,000 Walmart stores, right? And we're going to build a business over time. Because I've seen this movie so many times where we try to get into every single door, we don't get the velocities everywhere we need, and then we're delisted. We're out of business in a year, and we spent millions of dollars to create these products and tremendous amount of man and woman hours to get it done. I think there's a smarter way, and I'd love to see Henkel there, and I think that would have a huge impact on our business and our drive for more agility.
That's an awesome answer. Thank you. Ken, Natori.
I will say this. So I think, as I've described, we have, the majority of our organization is a wholesale business, sort of designing and selling into wholesale channels. Our e-commerce digital marketing group continues to grow. In 5 years, I certainly see AI being more prevalent and controlling much more of our, maybe 100, not 100%, but a lot more of our processes within the e-commerce digital marketing part of the company. My question, which I'm not sure about, is how much it will affect sort of the older school part of the company for a number of reasons. Some being resistance, some being, we are a design-driven company. There are a lot of merchandising-based companies there that really care about data and really look at those trends in terms of how they design. Part of what makes us different, and I hope some of you who know our brand think that, is that we're very design oriented and we really care about all of our designs being like truly representative of us, even if they might not be the best sellers out there. So until that mindset change, which somewhat depends on the founder and owner, who's not me. I'm not sure about that. And I think the other thing, something that I was thinking about during the earlier presentations is, we have fought the good fight. We have remained private. We've remained a family business as some of our same-size competitors have sold out to bigger companies. And it gets harder and harder to be independent because, when you have scale, there's so many more things you can do, throughout the supply chain. You get preferential pricing, everything makes it's much easier to be a bigger company, and we have stayed true and tried to be independent. So when I hear about things like, talk about automation in our warehouse and all of these AI applications that can improve so many parts of your business, the real answer to your question will be, okay, so to what degree will some of these vendors and some of these services be? How accessible will they be to not just the bigger companies, but to smaller, medium-sized ones as well? So, I'd like to see AI have a much bigger role in the company. I see a smoother path for that for our digital group. For the rest of our group, it really depends on, I guess, on a number of different factors.
Thank you.
When it comes to Unilever, my vision for Unilever is that it becomes a data-powered, fully agile, competitive organization as we go forth. Again, I'm going back to where I started about the ankle biters. That's the world we live in. So by default, Unilever or organizations like Henkel are built on scale, right? So this whole supply chain is also geared on scale. But we are talking about fighting the ankle biters who would only become bigger in the whole scheme of things going forth. It's not about creating more relevance through established brands. We will also act like ankle biters and create new brands. Unilever last year created 30 brands. The last time it created a brand was 50 years ago. So I'm just giving you a context of in 1 year, we launched 30 brands globally. So this is going to be, we're going to do more of this as we go forth. But that also says our backend needs to be efficient from a supply chain standpoint. And that's where the automation plays a big role in terms of inventory, warehouse management, and as well as in terms of this whole supply chain and demand planning integration. I have spoken at length of how do you create relevance to consumers, established brands, small brands, and how AI plays a role in that. So that's one part of it. In terms of workforce, obviously there will be a shift of workforce. There will be more data experts coming through, but business leaders, whichever part of the organization they are, whether it is marketing or whether it is sales or supply chain, they need to know both sides of the business. When I say they need to act as, to an extent, data scientists and as well as business managers. So basically, you need the core of the upskilling needs to take place, and that needs to happen at the core of the organization.
Fantastic, thank you.
And she just inspired me. Just one last point.
Of course.
Such a great point. And as you were talking, I was thinking about direct to consumer, and I think that we, Henkel, and Unilever need to be more, like Natori in some ways, in the bold moves that they're making in terms of being direct to consumer. And we may not sell direct. Henkel may not sell direct, but we have to capture enough data that we aren't renting the relationship anymore. Right now, our media partners and our customers, our retailers, they own the relationship with the consumer. We have to move that. We'll provide more value to the shopper and more value to the retailer at the end of the day if we become direct to consumer. So Soumya's remarks really inspired me to just kind of add that piece to the vision of Henkel, which I would love to see.
It's a great point. Fantastic. Lots to do then. So questions, please. I'm not sure if we have a microphone, but gentleman at the back, in the middle. We do have a microphone. It's coming around.
It's been a great dialogue to listen in on, and such great ideas coming from these industry leaders. I'm Ted Washburn with Splashlight Studios. It's one of the largest photo studios here in Manhattan to support, the e-commerce photos that go onto the websites such as yours. And I just got back from the greatest computer vision conference out in California, where the subject was, many of the subjects were on retail and fashion. Anyway, my question to the group here is, we've been working on something where on your e-commerce sites, you'll be doing A/B testing of the creative. And we've been working on something that will take all those thousands and millions of images that you A/B tested and extract the metadata from them and then tell you and your creative directors what was it about A that did better than B. And we're wondering, especially captured by your thought about beauty as regional or society specific. And with a global kind of company that's capturing the results of these A/B tests on their e-commerce sites, being able to say, why does a black t-shirt work better than a plaid shirt in this community, or this kind of Dove soap versus that? Are there teams within your organizations that would be interested in testing out?
Ken, do you want to say sort of how you're approaching testing, particularly on the website? I guess?
No, but here's the thing. It'll extract from the metadata feedback to your creative directors as to why image A worked better. And that's, creative directors rarely get any feedback as
Perfect.
to...
Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left. I want to get in a couple of questions, but Ken, do you want to say a quick word about testing? Because I think it's a great, you can do very sophisticated one-to-one personalization, but you can also test two versions of a homepage, for instance. So how are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, I think that's a huge white space and something that, if done affordably, we would love that. And actually, I think the whole arena of model photography is just the amount of money we spend. I told you, we've had to create a lot more creative assets. The amount of money we spend it's insane. And we've actually looked at some, I'm sure you don't want to hear this, we've looked at some of those technologies out there that, you put something on a dress form and it gives you back pictures on a model. We've looked at those. They're not up to snuff yet, but that is going to be a huge opportunity. If somebody can figure that out, brands like us the amount of money we could save is through the roof. But yes, I think not only would we want that, creative directors would want that kind of feedback too, to just really understand. We always used to say it's all about the product speaks, but that is, every time I hear that at the company, I say, you're wrong. That's completely not right. It's not the product. It's like, how does it look online? All of these other things. It's so important. So I think that's a great track to be on.
It's a great point. I want to get in a couple more questions if we have time.
Hi, David Davitt with DHL. Great discussion. Thank you a lot. Each of you talked about different data collection points, either getting it from a customer, getting it yourself, or potentially buying it. Could you talk about any potential bias in the data and how you're addressing that bias if you are identifying it?
Soumya, you want to field that one?
What kind of bias are you talking about?
If you're collecting a lot of the same data on existing customers, but you're wanting to break into a new market, how do you make sure that the insights you're generating will actually be representative outside the data you've already collected? And are you worried that it's only representative of certain data that's come in? So that's why the bias would come in. It would be kind of a narrow sense. Just curious.
Actually, that's a great question. I think when you collect data, one of the things which you want to do is you do not want to target one person with it, right? So you want to create scale. We also create a lot of lookalike audiences. Again, you want to create scale with the lookalike audience. But the only way which we have figured out on figuring out the bias part of it is actually put it on testing. Okay, what we do is when we create these audience segments, we size them out, okay, and we start putting media behind it. There are two kinds of optimization happen. We try to do creative optimization as much as before in flight, which means to say that it actually happens pre, so that when you're doing it in market, there are fewer variables to deal with it, because audience segment is a massive variable. Okay, so in flight, when you do these things, you need to figure out what are you getting out of data? One is, are you getting the right conversions? Are you getting the right uplifts? If not, you need to pivot. So again, it's a learning process. So those biases which you're talking about, we do not know unless it is in the market. But we do it during in-flight, but we try to reduce as many variables as possible. So we do creative before, and we optimize for our audiences in flight.
And as part of our tech stack, what we've got is an AI-powered DMP and DSP, AI-powered DSP. And so we put a little money into the machine and just let the machine go figure it out. So we have our segments, and we're putting media behind our segmentation, but then a piece of it, we just let the AI just kind of figure it out. So the AI is optimizing off of our segments, right? But the AI can also just go out and find high potential consumers as well. And then when the kind of exposure files come back in and you kind of take a look at what the outcome was, then you might find some really interesting things.
And with that, we're out of time. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Nice job. Thank you. Nice job.